This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the
Good
Gulf
evening.
Stream.
You're listening to Heartstock Radio. Thanks for being here. This is Carol Murphy. And this evening, as per usual, we have a fantastic guest. And our guest this evening is Heidi Drivdahl of Montana. In just a moment, she's going to come back and tell you all about what she's up to. Thank you so much for listening. This is Heartstock. We'll be right back.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island.
This is Heartstock Radio, and I'm Carol Murphy, your host. Thank you so much for being here and listening. This evening, our guest is Heidi Drivdahl. Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We have the great privilege of having Heidi present here with us in the studio. That's not always the case. Sometimes we get lucky. Usually it's over the phone, and I really love it when our guests are here. So thank you so much, Heidi, for being here. Tell us what you are up to and a little about yourself.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a first for me. I've never done a radio anything, so this is kind of cool.
Yay.
And any excuse to come home is good, so I'm happy to be in the studio with you. My name is Heidi Drivdahl. I founded Montana in 2012, and we distribute compostable single-use restaurant supplies, so cups, straws, to-go containers, that kind of things. They're all made from plants and are fully compostable. No plastics. So we're based in Bozeman. I have 2 warehouses in Bozeman, but we are distributing throughout Montana.
So you said you were home. So tell our listeners a little bit about what that means to you. And, you know, you're from Butte, and I'm hoping that you have a lot of fans listening out there. So the people,
that'd be great.
Those of you who know Heidi, thanks for being a part of this program. And Heidi, what was it like growing up in Butte?
Well, we moved into Butte when I was in 6th grade. We lived around Butte before that. We lived in Divide and Whitehall, and moved into Butte in 6th grade. Was a little nervous about being in Butte because there's a reputation, even on the outskirts. Well, tough guys and, you know, that kind of thing. But I remember the very first day of school, the nicest people. And those people that I met in 6th grade are still some of my best friends. Growing up here, it was a great place to grow up. I couldn't have asked for a better place to grow up. When I decided in high school that I was going to study chemical engineering, being from a Superfund site, growing up on a Superfund site, I always thought that's what I would be doing. I'd be doing reclamation work and cleaning up sites like Butte.
And what motivated you to go into that line or envision that for your life or yourself?
I have an aunt who is a chemist, and she was a weapons inspector for the International Atomic Energy Agency for a long time. And, you know, that always seemed pretty cool too. And a lot of people in her job were chemical engineers. I loved math and science, so it seemed a natural thing to do.
And how many other women were there in your graduating class?
In college?
Mm-hmm.
I started at MSU, and not very many at all. Then I transferred actually to Cleveland State, and I graduated from Cleveland State University. And surprisingly, most of the chemies were women. I think there were like 3 guys in our class. All of the other engineering disciplines were mostly men, but there was a lot of women in there, which was pretty cool.
So how did that transform and morph into Eco Montana?
So after I graduated, I moved to Napa, California, and got my first engineering job making eyeglass lenses and doing research on coatings. Super boring. But I lived in Napa, so I was learning about wine. And after about 2 years, I quit my engineering job and took a temporary lab position at a winery. No wineries would talk to me about seriously working there as a winemaker because I was an engineer. And winemaking is an art. So it's just a big chemical plant, really. So I got my foot in the door and ended up staying and being the assistant winemaker at Napa Wine Company and learning about organic farming, organic winemaking.
California has that effect. I know it had an influence on me because I saw what was possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the people that I met who are still great friends were chefs and farmers and entrepreneurs and, just doing what they loved and at the same time helping the environment and helping other people who love to do what they did. So it was a lot like home. Then, after my first son was born, we had 9/11, we had a huge earthquake in Napa. It was time to come home. And we came home and moved to Big Fork, and I was an organic cherry grower. And I know, it's different lifetimes. Grew cherries at my in-laws' place, got the place certified. I was a consultant for other growers, wanting to move down that path to organic growing. Made cherry jam and barbecue sauce and all kinds of stuff. So that was my chem lab.
Okay. We have to take a time out because there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much really important things that I really want to dig deeper into.
Okay.
So was there something that kind of changed within you as you went from, chemical engineer to growing cherries? I mean, was it things just came along? You said to yourself, "Oh, that sounds like fun," or do you feel like there was something else?
I feel like at each step of the way, there was someone or something that pointed me in that new direction. Being a part of Napa Wine Company and that organic growing and organic winemaking, and there were a couple links to Montana there with the family that owned it. They own property here. There was some of that. So
it sounds like you kind of found a tribe that changed you maybe in some ways.
Yeah. And I think the older I got also, and then having my first child, you really start thinking about what you're leaving for your kids and your grandkids. And I was in Big Fork for 10 years and had started really just the styrofoam and the plastic was making me insane. And
why?
Just seeing it in restaurants and just seeing, to-go containers. I just kept thinking, you put food in petroleum. How does that make sense?
Yes. Being a chemist, because the science in my mind kicks in a lot, and I want proof. Yeah. That's one thing that it does, but it also is like, no, that's irrefutable. That's hardcore data.
Right.
So that was probably kicking in, I'm guessing, with the styrofoam. Why is it so bad?
Yeah. Well, styrofoam and plastic never go away. Every piece of plastic and styrofoam that have ever been produced are here. They do not go away. They break down into tiny particles.
And why is that bad? So I hear people in the back of my mind going, so what?
Right. Yeah. Well, the plastic, as it gets smaller, it makes its way into the waterways. Fish eat it. You're seeing lots of things online and on TV right now about turtles with straws up their noses and, whales that wash up on shore dead and they open them up and they're full of plastic. They can't digest it and they think it's food. It also, the longer it's in the environment, it picks up toxins. So it's carrying toxins as it enters the animals.
What kinds of toxins?
There's PCBs and there's all kinds of bad stuff that gets into the water system and it gloms onto the plastic. So, we're drowning our oceans in plastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just like a cluster of plastic out in the ocean very far away that we don't have to worry about. This is getting into our food chain
Yeah.
and our food systems
Yeah.
and the natural environment. So you mentioned PCBs and, all the other nasty chemicals. What do we know about these things and how do they affect life on the planet and us?
Lots of neurotoxins out there that affect the development of babies before they're born, after they're born, developmental problems, physical problems. Growing up in Butte, we know a lot about that, right? We know that if you destroy your groundwater and fill it full of toxins, there's repercussions, and it's generations and generations that's going to affect. Last year there was 20 billion tons, 20 million tons of plastic produced in this country. 9% is recycled. 9%.
So what that means that all those little particles that will never break down become part of a natural ecosystem. They will always be present on the planet Earth.
Yes. Yes. So the more we make,
us sicker and sicker,
the more we are living in and drowning in.
Well, and it's interesting because, there's certain conditions that are on the rise in the planet, especially in male children. It was some of the congenital malformations and whatnot seem to have a higher rate. And I don't know why. I mean, there's mysteries here that we haven't figured out why some children are being born with certain conditions, and it's on the rise and we don't know why.
Right. Yeah. I think we've poisoned our planet for so long that it could be any of them.
Could be a lot of different things.
There's a lot of different things out there that are bad. Yeah.
So when you were in Bozeman at this point.
I was still in Big Fork when I had the idea.
Alrighty.
And when it came time to change the direction of my life again.
What was the prompting of that?
It wasn't a very fun one. It was yeah. After I moved to Bozeman, it was a long, ugly divorce and all that good kind of stuff. So in the middle of that, I started a new company because why wouldn't you?
You need a little more stress in your life at that point.
Well, the decision really, I had two ways to go. I hadn't been an engineer for a long time. So if I wanted to be an engineer again, I really needed to go back to school and get my master's and then figure out what I wanted to do. I had not worked for anyone else besides myself for 10 years. So that was another thing that I thought, I don't know if I can go back to working for somebody else. And I really was passionate about Eco Montana. I already had the name. So
you had the whole concept.
I
of the business that you were
I did.
start.
And I thought, if I don't do it now, I won't.
And most of this, it sounds to me, developed out of kind of just a pain point of seeing so many things that were made.
Frustration.
Yeah. Okay.
Really frustration. And even, I would say, I still even have this thought every once in a while that somebody else has got to be doing this. I at the beginning of the company, it was like, so I'm going to find out that somebody's already doing this.
Well, and then I find myself saying things like, it seems so simple to have a compostable piece of plastic. It can't be that hard.
Yeah. And it turns out it's not.
Yeah. So why aren't we doing it?
But more and more places are requiring it.
Okay.
Customers are requiring it.
Right.
And they're making their voices heard with their wallets.
Consumer demand. I think that's
Yes.
very important.
Yeah.
Okay. So I digressed. You needed more stress in your life, so you decided to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. And it took a while to get things up and running. And I chose Bozeman because I loved Bozeman when I went to college there. And after living in Big Fork for 10 years, the winters, I just hate that overcast. I grew up in Butte I can take 40 below, but I need some sunshine. So it was either Bozeman or Missoula because I felt like those were the two markets that would support that kind of thing initially. And it was, Bozeman was a pretty obvious choice there. So once I started there, I had been selling frozen organic pitted flathead cherries to a gal that has Nova Cafe, and
nice.
She has lots of places. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's the best kind of customer to have.
And she has great restaurants,
Yes,
by the way.
Yes. So she was my first customer. And she really helped me test out some of the products that I wanted to use and make sure that they were soak proof and things didn't leak and
fall apart as you're eating your...
Right. And just she continues to be just a great inspiration to me.
So we're at that midway point, and we're going to take a little music break here. Please enjoy. We'll be right back. This is Heartstock Radio.
To the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that Ribbon Highway, I saw above me that in the skyway. I saw below me that Golden Valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled and I followed my footsteps through the sparkling sands of the Galletin Desert, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was...
Thank you for listening. This is Heartstock Radio, and I'm Carol Murphy. This evening, our guest is Heidi Drivdahl of Montana. And Heidi, for some listeners who may just be tuning in, tell them a little bit about who you are one more time. And then what I'd really like to talk about is where you're at now with Montana. And we have so many really cool things. Well, they're cool things to talk about because people hear about them and learn about them, but they're not really cool in that they exist on our beautiful planet.
Right. I own Montana. I am the founder and chief ecomaniac at Montana. We distribute compostable single-use restaurant supplies. And we're based in Bozeman, but we do distribute throughout Montana. And then what was the rest of that?
Well, we were on the break, we were talking about some of the important things that a lot of people may not be aware of when it comes to plastics and human use of it and what it's doing.
Right.
You know, some really frightening long-term implications for our planet.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about where you're at right now compared to when you started the company.
Sure.
Some of your successes, and then I'd really like to talk some more about just statistical information and how it's affecting our planet. So.
Sure. So where we are right now, that first year that I got inventory delivered, it was into my single car garage. About 2 years later, I moved into a 500 square foot, just basically a storage unit. That was my warehouse. And it was pretty ghetto, but it was what I needed.
And it worked.
It worked. It didn't have any heat or insulation or bathroom, but it stored my stuff. And then 2 years ago, we moved into a new facility, twice the size, 3 times the size. We have 1,500 square feet now in that building. And it's actually like I have an office and a bathroom, and it's pretty cool. And in February, we actually expanded again. We got another warehouse that's about 1,000 square feet. So we have 2 warehouses now in Bozeman. What that equates to is last year, we kept 28 tons of plastic and styrofoam out of the system. That's how much product my customers used instead of plastic and styrofoam.
So as an entrepreneur, tell us a little bit about just the business aspect of it. I mean, who's your competition? And I would think that this would be a hugely exponential in growth industry.
Well, like I said, I keep thinking that somebody else has to be doing this. Some of the big distributors, Cisco, those guys, they carry some products like this, but they don't really push them. And they carry a very limited amount, and they're not local. Mm. So we are a local company. I really had no history, no experience with distribution other than moving my own cherries and, that kind of thing. And I'm glad that I didn't, because I think we do business a lot differently than those guys do. So I'm glad that I made it up as I went along. Customer service is
innovation.
Huge. Yeah. And customer service is huge. And I now have discovered that I do a lot of consulting for my customers. The questions I ask are a little different now. When I have someone starting a new restaurant come into the warehouse, my first question is, what are you going to be serving? So I have so many products now that I can suggest shapes, sizes, different things to them. And so that's kind of fun. But I don't know. I don't feel like there's that competition, because we're totally different. The services and really the amount of products that we offer is completely different than what they do.
So 2 questions come to mind. One is, what do you attribute your growth, your sustained growth to? And how do you supply? How do you source this stuff? Is any of it made in the United States?
Let me jump on that one first, because that is kind of cool. A lot of this stuff is not made here. It's made in China or Korea or
that's
Taiwan.
That's so frustrating.
It is. It is super frustrating. However, the company that I rep most of their products is world-centric and a very innovative and just a great company. They're a B Corporation. They give back to their communities and sustainable systems around the world. They contracted with some farmers in Ohio, and they're growing this stuff called miscanthus grass. It's a fast-growing, low-input grass that they can grow on land that they couldn't do anything else with. And then they built the facility right there, so they're making clamshells and plates right there in Ohio. And while they were at it, they kind of redesigned them so that they seal all the way around instead of just that one little tab, so it's less likely to spill in your car when you take your goodies home from the restaurant. So they're always trying to make their footprint smaller in addition to giving back. So the innovation is there. And, I have all kinds of thoughts about, well, we grow a lot of wheat here, right? Some of the plates are made out of straw. Yeah. So I see myself going down that path too. It's like we could be doing a lot of stuff. So, and then we can ship it to everybody else in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, I really am putting a message out there loud and clear that Montanans really need to make stuff that we can sell to other places.
Yeah. Back in the 70s, I think we grew, Montanans ate I think 70% of their food was grown here. And today it's like less than 20. Yeah. It's all shipped in. Mm. And a lot of it is grown here, shipped somewhere else to process, and shipped back.
Yeah, and that's just
it's crazy.
Sad. Yeah.
It's crazy. So there's a lot of things that we could change about that part of it. Sourcing I'm always getting new items in. There are so many more companies making this stuff now than there was 6 years ago.
Yeah,
there were a couple,
it's happening.
And now there's just there's cool new products that they're doing, and it's fun. Research is part of the fun part of my job.
And sourcing, because we have this handbag startup, and sourcing what you're talking about, non-toxic, plant-based. There's a world of possibilities. But to find that stuff is hard, but it's getting easier. So that's the really good news. And then, things made in the United States, nothing's made here anymore. Which, that too is changing now.
Yeah.
So growth, what do you attribute your success to?
I think people are just becoming more aware. When I first started, it was a lot of banging my head against the wall, talking to people, it wasn't important to them. It was a cost that they just didn't want to deal with in their restaurant or their catering business or whatever.
So when you say cost, they're already spending money on this stuff, right?
Yes. And the myth is that it's way more expensive. And it's not. I mean, it is way more expensive than Styrofoam, because Styrofoam is stupid cheap. I mean, if that is your only criteria, then you're going to use Styrofoam. But when you compare it to plastic, it's not that It's slightly higher, maybe a penny or two in some instances. And depending on the volume you buy, and we have different discounts for volumes and things like that. So a lot of it at the beginning was people looking at the price sheet first going, oh, it's not that much more. Mm-hmm. And then realizing that this isn't for every meal, right? And so we maybe can do this. Then people start seeing it in restaurants, and they start questioning the other restaurants where it's not at. And I always tell people, if you see it somewhere, if somebody hands you something great that is compostable, make sure and tell your server thank you, tell the owner, put it on Facebook, give them the kudos for it. They went that extra step. They care. If somebody hands you styrofoam, ask them for something else. Ask them for foil, which I know is not great either, but it's better than styrofoam, and it doesn't float. Mm-hmm. It's not going to, the turtles aren't going to think it's a jellyfish and eat it. Mm-hmm. So it's customer awareness, customer demands, and I now have more new restaurant people coming to me when they're just starting because they've seen it in other restaurants or food trucks or that kind of thing.
Cool. So how have you evolved as an entrepreneur, as your business has evolved? Have you had to change the way that you do things or your frame of reference?
I think as I've gotten bigger, I have had to learn to ask for help, which is not easy for me.
I don't usually.
It's so hard. And luckily I have a partner now who he just wants to help, and he is great at it, and he's super good at lifting heavy things. So he gets to do deliveries now. But I think that's the hardest thing. And I'm really bad at delegating because I just want to do everything. And so I'm learning that. And I think another big thing was learning to just take a breath and look at what I've accomplished in the last 5 years. I had so many instances in the beginning where it was like, maybe I should just get a job. And then something would happen. It was funny. I would get a phone call of somebody who had heard of me, and it was just a little inspiration, a little kick in the butt to keep going where I was going. Mm-hmm. And at times where I get frustrated that I hadn't grown faster, or I hit a roadblock with some certain customer, it was like, just look at what you've done in the last 5 years. So, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where are you going? What's your vision?
Well, onward and upward, lots more. We have lots more restaurants to tackle, and just in Bozeman. I would love to be have more product out throughout the state, just to get the word out that it's available and that it's not super expensive and it's doable. We also have a new thing in Bozeman called Happy Trash Can Curbside Compost Recycling, or compost pickup, sorry. So we have composting that can compost this stuff.
Oh, so we have just a little less than a minute left. And isn't it amazing how time flies, mm-hmm. especially when you're having fun? So how might folks reach you?
We have a brand new website that's gorgeous, eco-montana.com, and we're on Facebook. You can send me an email at ecomaniac.mt@gmail.com.
Thank you, Heidi. I really love what you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
And I love that you're here, and I love that you're from Butte. You're a Buttian.
I am.
This is Heartstock. I'm Carol Murphy. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Heartstock Radio is a production of KBMF 102.5 Butte America Radio. Hear our live programs every Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time via livestream at butteamericaradio.org.
And on the sign it said, no trespassing, but on the